"You're just an old man now, Dad. You don't need the money. Vanessa and I do." The words echoed in the sunlit kitchen, sharp and clean as a blade. Ethan's voice was calm, almost gentle, as if he were explaining something obvious to a slow child. Vanessa leaned against the marble countertop, arms crossed, her lips curled in a smirk that dared Harold to contradict her. In that moment, the world Harold had spent a lifetime building, every sacrifice, every hope, every ounce of love, cracked wide open. He felt the weight of the bank papers in his hands. His own name, forged in a neat, practiced script, stared up at him from the loan contract. $200,000! More than the value of his modest apartment, more than he'd ever saved, more than he could ever repay. His signature, copied, stolen, weaponized against him by the very people he had raised and trusted. He wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, to rage and curse and throw something heavy across the room. But the words stuck in his throat, choked by disbelief. He looked into Ethan's eyes, his son, his only family since Kathleen's death, and saw nothing but cool calculation, a flicker of impatience, as if this confrontation was just another obstacle to be managed. Vanessa's laugh was low and dismissive. "Come on, Harold, don't be so dramatic. You live in that little flat. You barely go out. You always said family comes first. Well, now it's our turn." Ethan slid the contract closer. "It's done, Dad. The bank approved it. Vanessa and I already used the money for the house and other things. You know how expensive life is these days. We'll take care of it. You don't need to worry." Harold's hands shook. "You forged my signature. That's a crime." Ethan shrugged, eyes never leaving Harold's face. "It's just paperwork, Dad, and you know how these things go. You probably would have helped us if we'd asked anyway." He tried to stand, but his knees threatened to give way. The kitchen seemed to tilt, the light too harsh, the air suddenly too thin. Vanessa watched him with idle amusement, her diamond ring catching the sunlight, flashing like a warning. "Don't make a scene," she said quietly. "It's not good for your health at your age.
Besides, you should be happy to help your son. Isn't that what fathers do?" Harold stared at her, at Ethan, at the strangers who had stolen his future. His heart hammered in his chest. For a moment, he felt small, diminished, invisible. The years of late nights, the double shifts to pay for Ethan's college, the sacrifices after Kathleen's cancer, all of it dismissed, erased, as if he'd never mattered at all. He dropped the pen, forcing himself to breathe. "You're making a mistake," he whispered, the words barely audible. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "The only mistake would be leaving you in charge of your own affairs. You never understood how the world works, Harold. Now please, let's not ruin the mood. We have a vacation to plan." Harold watched as Ethan gathered up the papers, slipping them into a sleek briefcase. "You can stay for dinner if you want," Ethan offered, almost as an afterthought. "Vanessa's ordered sushi." He shook his head, unable to speak. He turned and walked out, each step heavier than the last. The hallway outside was cool and quiet, its silence mocking him. He paused at the front door, looking back one last time, hoping, absurdly, that Ethan would call him back, would apologize, would admit it was all a mistake. But Ethan and Vanessa were already laughing, their voices fading as they disappeared into the next room, planning their next indulgence, celebrating their victory. Outside, the spring air was sharp, alive with birdsong and the scent of cut grass. Harold blinked in the sunlight, clutching the edge of the porch to steady himself. His old sedan waited at the curb, a relic in a neighborhood of gleaming SUVs. He climbed in, hands trembling on the steering wheel. As he sat there, staring at the neat line of expensive houses, something inside him shifted. The shock was still there, raw and jagged, but beneath it a new feeling began to take root. Not anger, at least not yet, but a kind of grim resolve. He would not be erased so easily. He would not let their betrayal be the last word. As he drove away, Ethan and Vanessa's laughter echoed behind him. They believed they had won. They believed the old man would simply fade away, powerless and forgotten. But Harold made a silent promise, one as fierce as any vow he'd made in his life. He would fight back. He would find a way to reclaim his dignity, his future, and the truth. They had underestimated him. That was their first mistake. And as the sun slipped behind the clouds, Harold's eyes, clear, bright, and quietly plotting, watched the house in his rearview mirror. He would become the shadow in their perfect world. The end, for them, was only just beginning. As they turned away, laughing about their next vacation, I made a silent promise. I would not be erased so easily. The drive back to his apartment felt longer than usual. Every streetlight an accusation, every passing car a reminder of the life he'd lost. Harold parked in the shadow of his aging building, staring up at the faded bricks and cracked windows. This place, once a refuge from the chaos of the world, now felt smaller, colder, emptied of comfort. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing with the sound of Ethan's voice. "You're just an old man now, Dad. You don't need the money." The phrase stuck to his skin like a bruise, replaying every time his mind drifted. He set his keys on the counter and looked around his one-bedroom apartment. The furniture was old but cared for, the walls covered in photographs. Kathleen's smile, Ethan's first day of school, 100 memories that now seemed distant, unreachable. Harold sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where he'd once helped Ethan with math homework, where he'd nursed Kathleen through chemo, where he'd written every check, balanced every account. Now he laid out the bank statement, the forged loan documents, and his own trembling hands. He called the bank again, hoping for a different answer. But the woman on the line was polite and firm. The account was real, the money was gone, the signature matched their records. "We're sorry, Mr. Bennett. There's nothing we can do unless you pursue this legally." He hung up, the words ringing in his ears. Legally. Go to the police. Turn his only son in for fraud? The thought made him sick. He remembered Ethan as a boy, clutching his hand in the hospital, afraid of the dark. He remembered the promise he'd whispered to Kathleen on her last night. "I'll protect him, no matter what." But what do you do when the person you swore to protect becomes the one you need protection from? That night, sleep eluded Harold. He walked the apartment, touching the old piano, the faded couch, the books lined up in neat rows. Each item was a relic from another life, a time when trust was a given, when family meant safety instead of threat. He poured himself a glass of water, hands shaking. His reflection in the window startled him. Eyes red-rimmed, hair thinner and grayer than he remembered. He looked every bit the old man Ethan had dismissed. But beneath the pain, something else was stirring. A flicker of anger, yes, but also a stubbornness that had gotten him through decades of hardship. He had survived worse than this. He would survive this too. Harold opened the old lockbox at the back of his closet. Inside were his most important papers. His marriage license, Kathleen's letters, Ethan's birth certificate. He thumbed through them until he found the file he wanted. His own signature card from the bank, a copy of his handwriting, proof of who he was. He compared it to the forged signature on the loan. The similarities were chilling. Whoever had done this, Ethan, Vanessa, both, had practiced, had planned. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was calculated, cold. He made a list of every account, every transaction, every person who might know more. He called a contact at the bank, an old friend named Thomas. "Tom, it's Harold. I need to ask you something, off the record." Thomas's voice was cautious but kind. "Is everything all right, Harold?" "No," Harold admitted. "I think Ethan and Vanessa have done something terrible. I need your help." There was a pause. "You want me to pull some records?" "Yes, and Tom, if you hear anything, if anyone asks about me or my accounts, will you let me know?"
"I will," Thomas promised. "And Harold, be careful. People aren't always who you think they are." After the call, Harold sat in the dark, the city lights flickering beyond his window. He felt the weight of the world pressing in, but for the first time since the betrayal, he also felt a plan forming. He would not confront them again, not yet. He would gather evidence, learn the truth, protect what little he still had. As dawn crept over the city, Harold wrote in his journal, a habit he'd kept since Kathleen died. "They think I'm finished. They think this is the end of my story. But I am not done. Not yet." He closed the book, stood, and faced the new day. The loneliness was still there, sharp and cold. The pain still gnawed at his heart. But somewhere beneath it all, the old stubbornness burned brighter. He would find his way. He would not be erased. As Harold gazed out across the city, he had no idea how deep the betrayal ran, or how far he would have to go to uncover the truth. Harold's days blurred into a routine of half-sleep and silent investigation. He kept his head down, avoiding calls from Ethan, ignoring the polite but insistent texts from Vanessa. "We need to talk, Dad. Let's not make this ugly." He knew better than to trust their sudden interest. Instead, he poured his energy into his lists. Bank accounts, statements, old contacts from his years in finance. At night, he pored over spreadsheets, highlighter in hand. The more he dug, the more anomalies he found. Small withdrawals, odd fees, new lines of credit he'd never authorized. It was as if someone had been testing the waters for months, finding the cracks in his financial life before going in for the kill. One morning, as he shuffled through his mail, a pale blue envelope caught his eye. The return address was from a church friend he hadn't seen in years, Marcia Evans. Inside was a note, handwritten, her neat script trembling with worry. "Harold, I hope you're well. I'm writing because something strange happened. Ethan asked if I would co-sign a small loan for him, said it was for your medical bills. I didn't feel right about it, so I said no. But now I'm getting calls from the bank about a loan in my name I never signed. Have you heard anything like this? Please call me if you can. I'm worried." Harold's hands shook as he dialed Marcia's number. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with anxiety. "Oh, Harold, thank goodness. I didn't know who else to ask. I feel so foolish." "Don't," he said softly. "You're not the only one." They traded stories for half an hour, Marcia's account eerily similar to his own. Ethan had spun a convincing tale. Harold was ill, prideful, refusing to ask for help. Ethan needed money to cover hospital bills, but didn't want to embarrass his father. The story had worked on Marcia's sympathy, but something had felt off, so she declined. Now she was being hounded for repayment on a debt she never agreed to. Harold's anger hardened into something else, a cold, focused resolve. If Ethan and Vanessa were willing to use his friends, who else had they targeted? He called Thomas next. "Tom, have you heard anything strange from Ethan lately?" "Actually, yes. He called last month about a business opportunity. Wanted me to invest, said you'd vouch for him. I thought it was odd, so I said no. Didn't think much of it at the time." Harold's gut twisted. The pattern was clear now. Ethan and Vanessa weren't just exploiting him. They were running a con on everyone who'd ever trusted the Bennett name. That afternoon, Harold met Marcia at the corner cafe, a quiet booth in the back where no one would overhear. She looked pale, tired, but grateful to see him. Over coffee, they compared notes, loan numbers, dates, the exact wording of Ethan's pleas. Every detail matched. "I thought I was helping you," Marcia whispered, tears in her eyes. "I never dreamed Ethan would—" "Neither did I," Harold said, voice heavy. "But we can't be the only ones." As if on cue, Thomas appeared at the door, a file folder tucked under his arm. "I thought you might want to see these," he said, sliding into the booth. Inside the folder were copies of emails, bank statements, and a list of other names, people Ethan had approached, all with similar stories. The three of them sat in a shocked silence, the realization settling heavy between them. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. It was a scheme, a network of lies and stolen trust that stretched further than any of them had guessed. "We have to do something," Marcia said, her voice trembling but firm. Harold nodded. "We will, but we have to be careful. If Ethan and Vanessa realize what we're up to—" Thomas leaned in, voice low. "They already know something's up. I got a call from Vanessa this morning. She said you were confused, Harold. Warned me not to let you drag me into your paranoia." A chill ran down Harold's spine. He realized, suddenly, how isolated he was. Ethan and Vanessa were moving fast, covering their tracks, poisoning the well before he could reach out for help. That night, someone knocked on Harold's door. He peered through the peephole and saw nothing but darkness. When he opened the door, a single sheet of paper lay on the welcome mat. "You're making this worse for yourself. Stop now. Family doesn't turn on family. No signature, no explanation, just a warning." Harold closed the door and locked it tight. He sat in the dark, the note trembling in his hand. He felt smaller than ever, afraid, outnumbered, unsure if anyone would believe him if he went to the police. But as he stared at the words, something inside him hardened. He would not back down. Not now, not ever. He picked up the phone and called Marcia and Thomas. "We're not alone," he said, "and we're not done yet." In the shadows of his small apartment, Harold realized. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous the truth became. But it was too late to stop now. Harold awoke before dawn, the city still shrouded in gray. For the first time in weeks, he felt something sharper than fear, an edge of purpose. The threats on his doorstep had lit a fire within him. He would not let Ethan and Vanessa keep the upper hand. If they wanted a war, he would give them one. He started with the evidence. Every bank statement, every strange withdrawal, every email and phone call, Harold cataloged it all, creating a digital dossier on his aging laptop. He combed through old voicemails, pieced together timelines, and printed out every document he could get his hands on. Marcia and Thomas sent copies of their own records, each new file revealing another layer of the scheme. They met at Harold's apartment, huddled around the kitchen table like conspirators. The coalition had grown. 2 more friends, both pensioners, had gotten suspicious calls from Ethan or Vanessa. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. "We need proof," Thomas said, voice clipped as he highlighted names on a spreadsheet. "Not just stories, but something that will stand up in court." "That, and we need leverage," Marcia added. "They're not going to stop unless we make them." Harold nodded, a plan already forming. "They think we're weak. Let's show them otherwise." He began to shadow Vanessa, careful and methodical. He watched from across the street as she entered a downtown boutique, emerging with bags of luxury goods. He followed, blending into crowds, noting every address, every license plate, every unfamiliar face she greeted with 2 bright smiles. One afternoon, Harold sat in his car outside an upscale restaurant, camera in hand. Through the window, he saw Vanessa laughing with a man he didn't recognize, a tall, well-dressed stranger who handed her an envelope. Harold snapped photos, heart pounding. He captured Vanessa slipping the envelope into her purse, their heads bent close in a conversation too intimate for business. That night, Harold uploaded the images, cataloged the time and place. With every click, his confidence grew. He wasn't just a victim anymore, he was becoming the hunter. Meanwhile, Thomas used his banking contacts to quietly inquire about Vanessa's accounts. He discovered a series of large, unexplained transfers, some routed through shell companies with no business history. The trail led to an address in another state, a potential safe house or a stash for stolen funds. They shared their findings at coalition meetings, each piece of information building their case. Marcia, once timid and unsure, grew bolder. She recorded her next conversation with Vanessa, baiting her into admitting the loan was all for Ethan's benefit and that Harold never would have agreed if he knew the truth. The recording was grainy but damning.
Harold reached out to Lisa Grant, a lawyer recommended by Thomas's nephew. Lisa listened patiently, taking notes as they presented their mountain of evidence. "This is more than fraud," she said. "This is a criminal enterprise. I'll help you, but you must be careful. They'll fight dirty if they sense you're closing in." Harold understood. Every day he checked over his shoulder, wary of strangers in the hallway, suspicious of every phone call. Vanessa's threats became more overt. Cryptic notes slipped under doors, slashed tires, an anonymous tip to Adult Protective Services questioning his mental health. The coalition endured, but the pressure mounted. Despite the fear, Harold felt alive. The nights were long, the risks real, but for the first time since Kathleen's death, he wasn't just surviving, he was fighting for something that mattered. Late one night, as he reviewed the latest batch of photos, Harold caught a detail he had missed before. The man with Vanessa, Derek Stone, was listed as a co-signer on one of the shell company accounts. The connection was suddenly clear. Vanessa had orchestrated the fraud, using Ethan as her puppet and Derek as her partner in crime. Harold's hands trembled, but not from weakness. They trembled with anticipation. He called Marcia and Thomas. "We have what we need," he said. "Tomorrow we go to the police, and to the press if we must. It's time to expose them." As dawn broke over the city, Harold realized the seeds of revenge he had planted were about to bear fruit. But at what cost? Vanessa Carter had always been a master of masks. To the neighbors, she was the poised wife with perfect hair and a dazzling smile. To Ethan, she was the ambitious partner, always urging him to reach higher, spend bigger, never settle. But as Harold and the coalition peeled back the layers, a very different picture emerged, one of calculation, manipulation, and cold ambition. Lisa Grant, their lawyer, was the first to notice the pattern. "Look at these wire transfers," she said, pointing to a screen filled with numbers. "They're all routed through companies that don't exist on paper. And the largest withdrawals happened right after the loan money hit Ethan's account." Thomas added, "And every time, Vanessa's signature is on the authorization." Harold felt his stomach twist. He remembered the early days when Vanessa first entered their lives, her charm, her warmth. He'd been so grateful Ethan had found someone to help him rebuild after Kathleen's death. He'd never questioned how quickly Vanessa took charge of their finances, how she'd nudged Ethan to take care of his aging father's accounts. Now, Harold replayed every conversation. The subtle digs about his age, the constant pressure for him to let go of control. He saw it all with new eyes, and realized how deeply Vanessa had planned this. But the biggest shock came from the photos Harold had taken. Lisa enlarged a shot of Vanessa and Derek, arms entwined as they left the expensive restaurant. Derek's face was unmistakable. He was the same man who, months earlier, had opened an account at Harold's bank under a false name. The shell companies, the wire transfers, the coordinated appearances, it all pointed to one thing. Vanessa and Derek were partners, not just in crime, but in life. Marcia gasped. "So Ethan was just a pawn?" Lisa nodded grimly. "I'm afraid so. He signed the papers, took the risks, but Vanessa and Derek orchestrated everything." Harold's heart ached, not just for himself, but for Ethan. His son's weakness, his need to please, had made him the perfect mark. But Vanessa's betrayal ran even deeper than Harold's own pain. Thomas slammed his fist on the table. "We have to go public. People need to know what she's done." Lisa agreed, but cautioned restraint. "We have enough for a criminal case, but a leak to the press could spook them. They might run, destroy evidence." Harold stared at the folder in front of him. Inside was the recording Marcia had made, the one where Vanessa, her voice low and confident, admitted to forging signatures and hiding money. There were the photos, the bank records, the emails between Vanessa and Derek, full of code words and promises of our future. He felt a surge of something fierce, a need to strike back, not just for himself, but for every person Vanessa had hurt.
The coalition was with him. They were afraid but united. That night, Harold wrote a letter, anonymous but clear. He sent copies of the evidence to the authorities, to the bank's fraud department, and, in a final act of defiance, to Vanessa's own parents. He wanted them to see what their daughter had become. The next morning, Ethan showed up at Harold's apartment, eyes wild, hands shaking. "Dad, I don't know what's happening. Vanessa's locked me out of our accounts. She's gone. Derek, he took her somewhere. I can't get in touch with anyone." Harold listened, torn between anger and pity. "You were used, Ethan, just like me, but it's time to face the truth." Ethan sank into a chair, head in his hands. "What do we do?" "We fight back," Harold said quietly. "We tell the world what really happened." As the coalition prepared to go public, Vanessa and Derek disappeared. But the evidence was inescapable. The police began their investigation. Lisa worked around the clock, filing injunctions, freezing accounts, building the case. And for the first time, Harold felt the scales tip. The lies were unraveling. The web Vanessa had spun was collapsing under its own weight. As Harold watched the officers carry boxes of evidence from Vanessa's former home, he knew the story wasn't over. The most dangerous liars are those who have nothing left to lose. The days that followed were a blur of strategy sessions, legal briefings, and mounting tension. Harold's apartment, once a quiet retreat, became the war room where the coalition gathered nightly. Marcia with her notebooks, Thomas with his spreadsheets, Lisa Grant orchestrating every move like a general before battle. Their case was strong, the evidence airtight. Lisa had filed injunctions to freeze assets, contacted the district attorney, and coordinated with the police fraud division. Yet every victory was met with a new challenge. Vanessa, clever and vengeful, was not going down without a fight. It started with whispers. Marcia received an anonymous letter accusing her of elder abuse. Thomas got a call from a blocked number threatening to expose his own minor financial mistakes. Harold's landlord was contacted by an anonymous tip suggesting Harold was a danger to himself, prompting an uncomfortable welfare check from Adult Protective Services. Lisa was furious, but unsurprised. This is textbook intimidation. Vanessa's trying to divide and conquer, make you all too afraid to testify. The coalition's nerves frayed. Marcia grew withdrawn, missing meetings. Thomas snapped at small things, his confidence shaken. Harold, too, began to feel the weight. The phone rang at all hours, always from unknown numbers. Strange cars idled outside his building. Once, he found a dead bird on his doorstep, a warning, crude and unmistakable. One evening, Marcia called in tears. "Maybe we should drop this, Harold. What if she really ruins us?" Harold listened, heart heavy. He knew the cost of standing up to monsters, the loneliness, the fear, the way every shadow seemed to lengthen. He wanted to tell Marcia it would all be okay, but the truth was, he wasn't sure. Vanessa had resources, cunning, and nothing left to lose. That night, the coalition gathered in silence. Lisa laid out their options. Press forward and risk further attacks, or withdraw and let Vanessa win by default. The room was thick with uncertainty. Harold looked around at the faces of his friends, people battered but not yet broken. He remembered Kathleen's words on her hardest days. Sometimes courage is just refusing to quit. He stood, voice steady but soft. We've all lost something because of her. But if we let her scare us into silence, she'll just do it again, to someone else. I'd rather lose everything than let her win. Thomas nodded slowly, resolve returning to his eyes. Marcia wiped her tears, squeezing Harold's hand. Lisa smiled, relieved. The next morning, the coalition delivered their statements to the district attorney's office in person, refusing to be cowed. The press caught wind. A local reporter with an eye for injustice started asking questions. Suddenly, Vanessa's campaign of threats was under a spotlight she could not control. But the attacks didn't stop. Vanessa filed a counter lawsuit accusing Harold of financial misconduct, alleging the coalition had conspired to defame her.
The legal bills mounted. Lisa urged patience, but the pressure was relentless. Harold lay awake nights, listening to the city and wondering if he'd led his friends into disaster. But each time he considered quitting, he remembered the look in Vanessa's eyes that day in the kitchen, the cold certainty that she could take whatever she wanted and never pay the price. Not this time. The coalition braced for the storm, battered but unbroken. As the first court dates appeared on the calendar, Harold felt the tension coil in his chest, but beneath it, a stubborn hope. They were still standing, and that, he realized, was a victory in itself. As rain lashed the city outside, Harold promised himself, no matter how dark it became, he would hold the line, until the very end. The courthouse was packed on the morning of the evidentiary hearing. Reporters crowded the steps, their camera lights flickering like lightning in a summer storm. Harold paused at the entrance, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt since Kathleen's funeral. He glanced at Marcia and Thomas, both pale but resolute, then at Lisa Grant, whose calm presence steadied them all. They walked in together, a coalition, not just of victims, but of survivors. Inside, the air buzzed with nervous anticipation. The judge, an older woman with an unyielding gaze, took her seat. Vanessa swept in moments later, dressed with calculated elegance, her chin high, lips pursed in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Derek followed, shoulders hunched, glancing furtively around the room. Ethan sat apart, confusion and shame warring on his face. He looked thinner, older, as if the last few weeks had aged him more than the last few years combined. As the proceedings began, Lisa stood, her voice ringing clear. She began with the coalition's story, how Harold's trust had been violated, how Marcia and Thomas had been drawn into Vanessa's scheme, how dozens of others had suffered in silence until someone dared to speak out. She laid out the timeline, connecting every loan, every forged signature, every transfer. Vanessa's attorney objected, but the judge waved him off. Let her continue. The scope of the allegations demands clarity. Lisa continued, playing the recording Marcia had captured. Vanessa's voice, smooth and unflappable, confessing that Harold never would have agreed if he knew the truth, and laughing about how easy it was to manage old men set in their ways. The words hung in the courtroom, chilling and damning. Gasps shot through the rows of seats. Harold felt his chest tighten, half with vindication, half with sorrow. This was the woman he had welcomed into his family, the woman whose laughter had once filled his home. Now, her laughter was evidence. Then came the twist. Lisa produced the photographs. Vanessa and Derek, hands entwined as they left an expensive restaurant. Derek handing her a thick envelope outside a luxury condo. She read aloud from the bank statements, tracing the flow of money from Ethan's account through shell companies to accounts controlled by Derek and Vanessa. She presented the signed affidavit from Derek's ex-business partner, who described Vanessa's methods in detail. How she manipulated Ethan, staged a friendship with Harold, even forged emails to isolate him from his friends. Ethan's hands shook. He stood up suddenly, his voice cracked and desperate. She told me it was just to help us get ahead. She said my father would never miss the money. I didn't... His words dissolved in a sob. Vanessa spun to glare at him, her composure fracturing. You're weak, Ethan. You always were. You let everyone walk over you, including me. The judge banged her gavel, calling for order. Miss Carter, you will respect this court, or you will be removed. Vanessa snapped back, her voice shrill now. This is a setup. They're all lying. My husband is a fool, and these people are just jealous. Lisa cut her off, voice like steel. Your Honor, the coalition requests immediate freezing of all assets and protective orders for every victim. We have clear evidence that Miss Carter and Mr. Stone have attempted to intimidate, harass, and threaten witnesses. The judge nodded, her face impassive. Motion granted. This court finds sufficient cause to proceed with criminal charges. All relevant assets are to be frozen pending further investigation.
A murmur of relief swept through the coalition. Harold felt a weight lift from his chest. The years of silence, the months of fear, all suddenly lighter. He looked at Marcia, who squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. Outside the courtroom, the press mobbed Vanessa, bombarding her with questions she couldn't answer. Her mask was gone now, replaced by panic. Derek tried to shield her, but reporters swarmed, flashes popping, microphones thrust forward. Ethan stepped into the corridor, shoulders slumped, eyes red. He approached Harold, voice trembling. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't see what she was doing. I just wanted things to be better." Harold looked at his son, searching for anger, but all he found was exhaustion and a quiet, aching pity. "We all wanted things to be better, Ethan, but you have to own what you did. That's the only way to move forward." Reporters turned to the coalition, asking for statements. Lisa spoke for them. "Today isn't just about one family. It's about standing up to those who prey on trust and weakness. Justice is possible, even when it feels hopeless." As the courthouse emptied, Harold looked up at the sky, gray clouds breaking, sunlight streaming through. He knew the fight wasn't over. There would be more hearings, more battles, more nights of doubt. But for the first time, he believed they might actually win. Later, as he sat with Marcia and Thomas at a quiet cafe, the three of them shared a moment of peace. "We're not victims anymore," Marcia whispered. "We did it, Harold. You did it." He smiled, feeling the bruises of the past begin to fade. The web of lies had finally unraveled, and in its collapse, they had found each other, and themselves again. But as Harold walked out into the light, he couldn't shake one thought. For every web untangled, there's always one more knot. The reckoning had come for Vanessa and Derek, but what would come next for Ethan and for himself? The city buzzed with the aftermath of the trial. Newspapers ran headlines about the Portland inheritance fraud scandal, splashing Vanessa's and Derek's faces across front pages. On local news, legal experts dissected the case, how a web of lies had ensnared not only an elderly man, but an entire community. For Harold, the world felt both larger and smaller. He still lived in the same modest apartment, still walked the same tree-lined streets, but now strangers whispered as he passed, some in sympathy, some in awe of the man who'd brought down a well-connected fraudster. He tried to ignore the attention. All he wanted was peace, but peace was not easily won. The sentencing hearing drew even more attention than the trial itself. The courthouse was silent, thick with anticipation. Vanessa sat at the defense table, her posture rigid, hands clenched in her lap. Derek stared at the floor, visibly defeated. Ethan was brought in separately, his face gaunt and pale. The judge addressed the court. "This case is a tragic reminder of how greed and manipulation can devastate families and communities. The evidence is clear. Ms. Carter and Mr. Stone orchestrated a deliberate campaign of fraud, using Mr. Bennett's trust as a weapon." She turned to Ethan. "And you, Mr. Bennett, allowed yourself to become a tool in that scheme. The court considers your cooperation and contrition, but cannot ignore your complicity." The verdict was swift. Vanessa and Derek were sentenced to serve time for conspiracy and fraud, all assets seized, forbidden from contacting Harold or any coalition members. Ethan, owing to his cooperation and testimony, received a suspended sentence and was ordered to perform community service, pay restitution, and attend mandatory counseling for financial abuse and manipulation. As the gavel fell, Vanessa broke her silence. Her voice, once so smooth, was ragged with desperation. "This isn't over. None of you will ever understand what it's like to lose everything." She glared at Harold, hatred and regret battling in her eyes. Derek simply bowed his head, shoulders shaking. Ethan turned to Harold, tears streaking his face. "Dad, I'm sorry. I ruined everything. I ruined you." Harold swallowed hard, his own anger mingling with a profound sadness. He reached out, resting a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You made mistakes, son. So did I. But it ends here. If you want forgiveness, earn it, by changing, by making things right for others." After the hearing, the coalition gathered outside, blinking in the pale winter sunlight. Marcia hugged Harold tightly. "You saved my home," she said, voice thick with emotion. Thomas shook Harold's hand, gratitude plain on his face. Around them, other victims wiped away tears. For the first time in months, relief and hope mingled. A local minister approached Harold, pressing a hand to his arm. "You've shown this city what courage looks like, Mr. Bennett. You've given others the strength to speak up." Harold nodded, humbled. "I just wanted to stop the hurt, for me, for Ethan, for everyone." That night, Harold walked the city alone, letting the cold air clear his mind. His phone buzzed with messages, from neighbors, from strangers, from other victims who wanted advice or simply to say thank you. He realized the fight had changed him. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a voice for those who had none. But not all wounds healed overnight. Ethan's apology, though sincere, could not erase the years of trust lost. Vanessa's bitterness lingered, poisoning the last threads of family connection. Harold mourned what could never be restored. Yet, as he returned home, the city lights twinkling against the dark, Harold felt something unfamiliar. A sense of closure, of a burden finally set down. The reckoning had come, and though the scars would remain, so would the lesson. Truth, once revealed, could never again be hidden. As Harold locked his door that night, he wondered if forgiveness was possible, not just for Ethan, but for himself. The hardest battles, he realized, were always fought in the quiet that followed justice. Winter's grip on Portland finally loosened its hold, but inside Harold's heart, the cold lingered. He moved through the days with a kind of cautious hope, as if afraid that any sudden movement might shatter the fragile peace the trial had left behind. At first, Ethan's absence felt like a relief. The apartment was quieter, the phone no longer rang with desperate pleas or angry threats. But as the weeks passed, that silence turned heavy. Memories surfaced at odd times. Ethan on his first bicycle, wobbling down the sidewalk. Ethan at high school graduation, grinning with pride. Ethan, pale and lost after Kathleen's funeral, clinging to Harold as if the world might swallow them both. One afternoon, as Harold sorted through old photos, the phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but something in him knew. Ethan's voice was thin, uncertain, weighed down by shame. "Dad, I'm still at the shelter. They have me cleaning up, serving breakfast. I see a counselor every week. Sometimes I think about leaving, but I know I can't run anymore. I'm trying to make things right. I just wanted you to know." Harold's heart twisted. How could he explain the ache of loving someone who had hurt him so deeply? He cleared his throat. "I know it's hard, Ethan. Just keep showing up. That's all anyone can do." After the call, Harold sat for a long time, staring at the faded photograph of his family, before everything cracked. He realized forgiveness would not come in a single moment. It was a series of choices, repeated every day. The coalition, too, was learning to heal. Marcia, her spirit rekindled, started a small support group at the community center. At their first meeting, she stood before a handful of strangers, voice trembling but clear. "I never thought I could be fooled," she said, "but shame grows in silence. When we speak out, we break its hold." Thomas found purpose in advocacy, visiting churches and senior centers, teaching others how to spot the warning signs of exploitation. He grew more patient, more present, his laughter slowly returning. Harold attended every meeting, sometimes just listening, sometimes speaking. The stories he heard were heartbreaking. A widow whose nephew drained her savings, a retired teacher tricked by a grandson on the phone, a man who lost his home to a trusted friend's false promises. Each story was different, but the pain was the same. One evening, a young woman named Felicia stood to speak. When my brother stole from me, I thought I'd never trust anyone again. But seeing all of you, seeing Mr. Bennet stand up for himself and for us, reminds me that people can change, or at least they can try." Harold smiled, humbled. He realized that by facing his own pain, he'd given others permission to do the same. Outside the meetings, life crept back in. Harold started tending to his tiny balcony garden, coaxing daffodils and tulips from the cold soil. Marcia invited him to Sunday dinners, where laughter mingled with memories of all they'd lost and found. Even Thomas, who once kept his emotions locked away, began to open up, sharing stories of his late wife and their travels. But the journey was not linear. Some days, Harold woke gripped by old anger. He'd see a father and son in the park and have to look away. Other days, he felt almost normal, until a song, a smell, a passing phrase would bring it all back. Ethan wrote letters, sometimes every week, sometimes less. He described his days at the shelter, peeling potatoes, learning to listen, watching others struggle with their own regrets. He never asked for forgiveness, only understanding. "I can't fix what I did," he wrote once, "but I can try to be better now and tomorrow and every day after that." Harold's replies were brief but honest. "Proud of you for staying. Keep going." He didn't say, "I forgive you," not yet, but the words hovered between the lines, waiting to be spoken. One cold March evening, Harold attended a larger gathering for financial abuse survivors. He was asked to share his story. At first, he hesitated, but the room was full of faces, young and old, hopeful and broken. He spoke quietly, telling them about Kathleen, about Ethan, about the coalition that refused to be silenced. He described sitting in the courtroom, hearing Vanessa's voice on the recording, watching Ethan realize the truth. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," he said. "It's deciding that my life is bigger than what someone did to me." Afterward, people lined up to thank him. An elderly man squeezed his hand. "I thought I was too old to start over. You proved me wrong." At home, Harold found Ethan waiting outside the apartment building. The younger man looked thinner, hair shaggier, but his eyes were clearer than Harold remembered. "Mind if I come up?" Ethan asked. They sat together in the living room, two men bound by blood and regret. The silence between them was heavy, but not hostile. "Dad," Ethan began, "I know you may never trust me again. But I want to be part of your life, even if it's just as a reminder of what not to do." Harold looked at his son, searching for the right words. "Trust takes time. But you're here. You're trying. That means more than you know." They talked for hours about Kathleen, about childhood memories, about the future. For the first time, Harold allowed himself to hope. Later, as Ethan left, he turned at the door. "Thank you, Dad, for not giving up on me, for still letting me try." Harold nodded, a lump in his throat. "Keep trying, Ethan. That's all anyone can ask." That night, Harold wrote in his journal, "Forgiveness grows slowly, like spring after a long winter. I won't rush it, but I'll water it. I'll give it light. I'll let it grow." Outside, daffodils pressed up through the earth, reaching for warmth. Inside, Harold felt the first true stirrings of peace. As the city bloomed into spring, Harold realized forgiveness was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, for himself, for Ethan, and for everyone still searching for their own way forward. The first true warmth of spring returned to Portland, and the city seemed to breathe again. Harold stood at his window, watching sunlight glint off the river and listening to the distant laughter of children in the park below. He felt the ache of old wounds, but it was softer now, like a scar that no longer throbbed with every heartbeat. His balcony garden had become a testament to patience. Daffodils and tulips in riotous bloom, green shoots promising more life to come. Each morning, watering the fragile stems, Harold marveled at their stubbornness, how they pushed through winter's hard soil, reaching for light they could not see but somehow believed in. He wondered if healing was the same. One Saturday, he joined Marcia and Thomas at the community center, where the coalition's support group had doubled in size. There were new faces: a young mother whose sister had emptied her savings, a retired bus driver tricked by his own nephew, a teacher who'd lost her pension to a trusted advisor. Each story was unique, yet heartbreakingly familiar. Harold listened to them all, offering a nod, a word of comfort, sometimes just quiet presence. He saw himself in each of them, the confusion, the anger, the shame. But he also saw resilience. These people had survived. They were learning to trust again, not just others, but themselves. During a break, Marcia pulled Harold aside. "I never thought I could laugh again," she whispered, eyes shining. "Not after everything, but look at us now." Thomas joined them, grinning. "We're like those flowers on your balcony, Harold, bent, battered, but still growing." Later, Harold was invited to speak at the front of the room. He hesitated, then took a deep breath and began. "I once believed betrayal was the end of the story, that when someone breaks your trust, the best you can do is survive. But I've learned that survival isn't enough. We deserve more. We deserve to heal, to hope, to build something better from the ruins." He looked around at the group, at Marcia's shy smile and Thomas's steady gaze. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to move forward, even when the past would hold you back. It's something you give yourself so you can live freely again. He told them how, in the darkest moments, he'd wanted to give up, how the coalition had pulled him back from the edge, how, even now, he sometimes struggled with anger or regret. But every day, the burden grew lighter. After the meeting, a young man approached him, voice trembling. "My father conned me out of my savings. I thought I'd never trust anyone again. But hearing your story, it gives me hope. Thank you." Harold smiled, feeling a quiet pride. "You're not alone. You never were." That evening, Ethan came by for dinner. The conversation was awkward at first, but gentler than before. They spoke of simple things: gardening, a new book Harold was reading, the best place in town for pie. Gradually, the walls between them thinned. As dessert was served, Ethan looked up. "I want to make things right, Dad. Not just with you, but with myself. I know it'll take time." Harold nodded, warmth in his chest. "Time and effort, but you're not the same man you were. I can see that." After Ethan left, Harold sat by the window, the city sparkling in the dusk. He felt the weight of the past, but it no longer defined him. He was not just a victim, nor only a survivor. He was a man who had chosen, again and again, to seek the light. He opened his journal and wrote, "There is life after betrayal, and hope after heartbreak. Trust can be rebuilt, slowly, carefully, like tending a garden. And forgiveness, though hard-won, is always worth the effort. I'm grateful for the friends who stood by me, for the strangers who shared their stories, and for the chance to begin again. This is not the end, it's a new dawn. No matter how deep the wound, healing is possible. Betrayal does not get the final word. Courage, honesty, and compassion do. If you are struggling, remember, you are not alone, and your story matters." Harold's journey is proof that even when trust is shattered, life goes on. The pain lingers, but so does the possibility of joy, of new beginnings, of love restored in unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below, or reach out to someone who needs to know they're not alone. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of hope, healing, and second chances. Thank you for listening, and remember, every ending is just a new beginning waiting to unfold.